Okay, well, we're past the top of the hour here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again today in what is our last in this series of webinars that we've been doing. My name's Mike Smitherman. Good to talk to everyone again. I've got Marius with me again today. Hi, Marius.
Hi, Mike. Hello, everyone.
So the usual housekeeping pieces. So large crowd on today. So I'm muted. Happy to take questions through the Q&A, or feel free to chat with us in the chat window. We'll keep track of those. We'll leave some time at the end here as usual to get to those. This is being recorded as usual. So we will send out the recording afterwards to those that are interested. And yes, Adam just answered that. We are recording this, so it'll be available, and we'll send that out post event. Um, so, Maris, if you can just forward. So, for those that have stuck with us through one or more of the sessions that we've been doing, you'll know that we've been focused on sort of talking about AI for BI and everything that's going on in that space recently, starting with sort of some of the gotchas around enabling Ask Your Data solutions for BI solutions, and
Hmm.
the various tools and technologies that are available to you as you think about implementing this in your organization. And last time, Marius spent some time talking about sort of how to think about implementation and playbooks around that. Those are all also available up on our YouTube channel if you didn't get a chance to see those. Metric Insights up on YouTube. Feel free to subscribe to that channel as well. We push a lot of stuff up there. Um, so if you did miss any of those and are interested, I'd encourage you to go back and watch them. Today, our focus is going to be sort of bringing it full circle and really looking at some stuff in sort of real life and in practice in terms of how Metric Insights is addressing a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about in these previous sessions. And hopefully this will sort of bring it all together in sort of a realistic practical way, and give you some ideas about things that you could be doing in your organization. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Marius, who's going to sort of summarize some of the stuff we've touched on to date, and then I'll take it back in a few minutes, and we'll jump into the Metric Insights platform live, and I'll take you through a demo of some of these pieces as we see it. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Marius.
Thank you, Mike. So let's get started. Just to kind of set the stage here, we'll take you through a few slides, and then we'll jump right into, looking at some real solutions and have Mike show you kind of interactive demo so you can kind of understand how things fit together. I'm really excited that this is going to be an opportunity to get out of the theory and into the practice. But to kind of frame that demo, I think it's useful to understand kind of where people generally start their journey. With AI for BI, the most common thing we see is that folks go, well, we've got a bunch of BI tools, also cloud databases. They all have AI capabilities. Let's go ahead and turn those on, and see, how far does that get us? And it's a very natural thing to try to do, and you do get some results there, but you don't really get very far. And this is, by the way, despite the fact that there some of these AI agents are quite capable. So in particular, Snowflake, the Databricks agents, with the improvements, the underlying LLMs across the board in these foundation models, they've gotten pretty good. The things that were very difficult to do, maybe 6 months ago, are now being done much better with more capabilities and so forth. But nevertheless, despite the fact that the intelligence behind these agents is improved, the results that you get out of simply just turning them on is not that great. You don't get very far, right? And to understand why, it's a good thing to understand sort of what are the major problems that occur by just sort of turning on AI inside of your existing BI tool. The first thing is that you don't have this business context layer that's so important, available to the agents to be able to work with, generally speaking, right? So a great example of this is, maybe you've turned on a Fabric data agent and it has access to your semantic model for a particular Power BI dashboard or a set of dashboards. Um, but then if you look at if, when a user asks a question, there are a whole bunch of contextual components that they need to understand. The agent needs to understand in order to be able to answer, what different abbreviations mean, terminology, things of that nature. They're not in the semantic model. And in those cases, you can't necessarily get correct answers. Maybe it's using a world knowledge for how a particular term is defined, how gross profit is defined, whereas your definition is very different. And so that's a fundamental flaw that leads to kind of spotty and not great results. The second problem is that if you just turn on if you turn on Copilot for Power BI and maybe some Fabric data agents, and you turn on, maybe you've got Genie for Databricks, or you've got Cortex Analyst for Snowflake, and you turn those things on, or maybe you're turning on Pulse for Tableau. You basically are creating a set of silos. There are silos across technologies, but even within the particular technology, things are siloized. So if you're in a particular Power BI dashboard and you ask Copilot a question in that dashboard, you're asking a question about the semantic model of that dashboard. That's a pretty narrow silo. And more likely than not, your user asking the question wants to understand sort of why. They want to understand root cause analysis, what's happening, what's driving this change. And that typically requires information that may fall outside the semantic model. But, they don't have any way of knowing what's in the semantic model. So they're just going to get sort of a result that tells them, well, I can't answer the question, or the answer is going to be low quality. And that's because, the knowledge required to support that particular question is either in a different domain, maybe in a completely different agent. Maybe there's no agent for that. Maybe it is external information that hasn't been collected into the domain. So that's sort of a fundamental issue that plagues these. And as a result, kind of the combination of this lack of business context, these siloed approach where you've just got spot solutions for very narrow things. It's a very poor user experience. First of all, you've got all these different capabilities that are scattered across the tools and the dashboards and the capabilities that you have. Oftentimes, if they're agents outside of the like a Databricks or Fabric or a Snowflake, if they're from the cloud database providers, they're disconnected from the BI experience, so they're not grounded in BI, right, which is very important. And it's very hard for folks to remember, where do I go, and then how do I use these things to actually get something useful. And so most people that try to just turn these things on, they may get some sort of a very early sort of promising results in terms of like questions that can get answered. But if they look at sort of engagement and usage 6 months down the line, typically these solutions are not broadly adopted because they're just not successful in answering the true more complex questions that users ask. So what are the steps to being successful? What are we going to show you kind of in our demo today? It really falls down, we believe, at a high level to three things, right? First of all, you've got to have governance, and the governance starts at the BI layer, right? If you think about it for a moment, if you ask yourself the question, what do your business users trust? What do they use as the ground truth for analytics? It is the dashboards that they're using every day, that they try that have been published, that people have been certified. They're the things those are the things that they know when they know the numbers are right. So anytime they ask a question from any data agent, no matter what technology it is, uh, and they get an answer, generally speaking, because hallucinations are still a real thing, right? The hallucinations have decreased, the rate of hallucinations has decreased, but only at a much slower pace than the model capabilities increased, right? Because of that, they're going to want to check their answers, and giving them a SQL statement inside of the agent, or just a high level plan for how the thing was answered is not going to give them the confidence to know that that number's right. The way they're going to get the confidence is by going back to a dashboard they trust and seeing, okay, do these numbers kind of jive with what I'm seeing in these trusted sources. So having a governed BI layer is sort of table stakes. It is the foundation on top of which you're building your AI agent infrastructure. If you don't have that, you're trying to build a house without a foundation, and that's obviously not going to work. And similarly, your AI agents, you've got to think about, if you think about it strategically, it's very easy now to create a Fabric data agent or an agent in Snowflake or an agent in Databricks or any of these other tools. There are foundations where you can vibe code stuff and create things with Python. So over time, you're going to get all these different agents in your environment. You need to have a governed space where only the blessed agents, only the high quality agents that are in fact, able to produce kind of consistently reliable and trusted results. Only those are going to be bubbled and available to the users. And those second tier things, those experiments, those things that people create, sure, they can sit somewhere in the corner, but they're not going to be part of the user experience in a governed environment, right? Because they're going to yield you inconsistent or low quality results. So governance is the first sort of key pillar. The second thing is that it's very important to understand how people think about the questions that they ask. Your users are not coming to these agents to ask for recipes, right? Or some random fact about their business. They're coming to ask about the data, the metrics, the KPIs that matter to them, right? And so it's having a KPI first or a metrics first approach in thinking through this is very helpful because it does two things. One, it aligns your development efforts around making sure that you are solving and creating agents that are going to answer the questions for the things that users care about. And second, it helps users figure out what to ask, right? If a KPI first approach makes it possible for users to understand, what has actually changed in my data, and based on that, on the KPIs that matter to me and what's changed, those are the things that I want to be able to do follow-ups on, right? And the final piece, and this is also critically important, if you think about these agents as the BI agents for your users. If they're the equivalent of, you have an analyst today and it's human analyst, and you're trying to say, well, it's too hard to give every single person in your organization their own BI analyst. That's impossible, right? Human analyst, because that's prohibitively expensive. But it is not prohibitively expensive to give everyone in your organization their own AI analyst for BI. But if you think about it from that framing, which is how most business users think of these services, it's important to not just allow the ability for users to ask questions of these agents, but also to give these agents the capability to tap the user on the shoulder and say, hey, there's something going on in an important metric that you care about. Go take a look. And when they tap them on the shoulder, to tell them, not only, hey, did this number dropped suddenly today, but this is why I think this number dropped. Here's some root cause analysis that will get you pretty far along in figuring out what to do about it, right? Because users care about KPIs that matter to them, and they care about those KPIs only when those KPIs have had material changes, right? That sales may be very important to me, but if I'm tracking against my target, if I was tracking against my target last week, I'm tracking against my target this week, that's much less interesting to me than if, yes, last week I was tracking against my target and this week I'm not, right? That change, that material change, and an important KPI is what I want to know about. And I want to know about it right away because I want to take action. I don't want you to wait for me to go and check that out on my dashboard because maybe I'm too busy to do that on that particular day or week. So with that in mind, we're going to jump into a demo now, but I want to frame for you what's happening behind the scenes of the demo that you're going to see, right? So how do we kind of put together this sort of KPI first experience that's AI driven and links to your BI? Well, first, we pulled in all of the certified BI reports and dashboard into Metric Insights, which is your kind of your governed landing BI portal for that content. That creates that governed foundational layer on top of which we can build. The grounding is there, right? Then we identify and load all the key metrics and the KPI information from that. And that can come from these dashboards, or it can come from Snowflake, it can come from Databricks, some other database sources, wherever it is that is the system of record for each of these KPIs. They can be pulled in with all the various dimension models. They're brought in so that they can be used for the basis of analysis and presentation to the user. So the high level numbers. Then we look at these numbers and we compute in an automated fashion. We compute what are the variances, again, because the changes is what are the things that should trigger this discovery. We identify, okay, here's what which KPIs changed, whether it's month over month, day over day, what the right frequency is. We identify that these KPIs change and how much they change by, right? And then we look and filter that down to the most significant changes. Right? And you don't want to perform root cause analysis on a metric that changed by a small amount, or maybe it changed by an amount only in a by a large amount, a large percentage in a particular combination of dimensions that is really insignificant as a percentage of the total for that KPI. So it's immaterial, right? Or maybe it changed this week over last week, but there's a seasonality, right? This week was Christmas, so there's your retail, you're going to have a material change there. So factoring all that in and then figuring out what is really significant, filtering that out so that you just get the things that are really material and not immediately explainable through just regular trends that are there. And then for those, then generate an AI-based alert and a root cause analysis. So create something that will notify the user that something has gone sideways or in some way changed, and tell them potentially why that's changed. What do we know about what's driven that change? Then, of course, if you've got this whole body of potential, dimensional space of alerts and root cause analyses, you need to map that to what the user cares about, right? I might care about the, sales metrics. You might care about production metrics. Well, you've got to kind of filter that down so that you're not sending alerts to people about KPIs that are not relevant to them, maybe not even accessible to them. And then you package those alerts with those filtered BI reports, and you can distribute those alerts to users. And then those the root cause analyses are available in those reports that are pushed out, that are available for users. They're also available in an interactive experience that Mike will show you in a moment. And then finally, you distribute that out to the relevant user, right? So that could be in email, that could be in Slack, that could be in Microsoft Teams. But the point is, this is the push component where those things that are the most significant changes that I should pay attention to right now, those things come to me and tap me on the shoulder and get my attention. Okay, so with that, let's jump in and see what this all really means. So I'm going to hand it off to Mike, where it gets the most fun part of this webinar, actually showing real stuff.
Thanks, Marius. Let me just share my screen here. All right, so let's take you through really that flow that Marius just explained in the slide in the Metric Insights platform. For those that have been on previous webinars, some of this may be familiar from a foundational piece, but we'll touch on the foundational pieces and then transition into the AI components and how they fit into this. So as some of you might know, as we've said, the core of what Metric Insights is this ability to govern your BI in a centralized portal or catalog where you're certifying and publishing production ready, tested dashboards and reports for your users so that when they access them, they know that they can trust the data and they know that it's the right version of a report that they should be looking at. So what you're looking at here is the catalog view of Metric Insights. Each of these tiles on the screen is a particular report or dashboard coming from various different tools and technologies, Power BI, SAP, Tableau, whatever it might be, including things like files and spreadsheets and PDFs. But each of these has been curated and published into the catalog in a certified way, as we'll see in a minute. So users then have one place to come and browse on the left-hand side, a single category structure, regardless of where the report may have come from. And if there's something interesting to them, like this customer support overview, if they click on that particular tile, um, we're basically exposing metadata around what this report is. And this is a critical piece both for the catalog, also the AI component that we're going to look at in a minute, where obviously we've got names, descriptions, ownership, maybe classification of data. Some of this information we're collecting from the BI tools, some may be coming from your data catalog, the fact that it's refreshing daily with new information. We build out a glossary of metrics and definitions and calculations that exist within the dashboard so that there's a consistent sort of understanding of what the dashboard is telling a user. So this metadata is critical so that when a user then clicks into a particular report, they've got the context around what that is. So in this case, we're taking them into a live Power BI report where passing their credentials in. So they're now accessing the embedded live Power BI report within the Metric Insights catalog and portal. So it's giving them that sort of, confidence around what the report is. It's the right version. They know they can trust it because it's been certified and they've got the literacy around what the report actually contains. So having that sort of curated set of content and the necessary metadata around what that content is kind of again the table stakes in terms of driving an AI effort on top of this. So let's transition into that and talk more about it. So Metric Insights has this concept of what we call our concierge. It's an LLM-driven conversational interface that solves a number of things that we're going to talk through. At its core, it's got some basic functionality that integrates with the catalog that we've just been looking at. And the sort of things it does there is, if users have questions around things like, the definitions, I can always go in and ask questions around, how is something defined or what does a term mean? And, the concierge will go away and obviously interrogate the glossary that we have in this case or the metadata around the particular report. It can also be used to search the catalog, so which reports contain this metric. Again, asking sort of natural language questions as a follow-up, it's going to again pass it off in this case to the search so they can go and search through the catalog for that metric that we were just getting a definition for and, ultimately bring me back results associated with that. So using concierge as a way of navigating what's possible in the catalog, but navigating from a natural language perspective is sort of one use case that we have here that we can use it for. But let's move on to sort of the ask your data type use cases that we've been talking about throughout the whole series of these webinars. So Marius spoke about this sort of metrics first approach. I think one of the challenges, of enabling this sort of technology, and Marius touched on this, is kind of what questions should I even ask? Not what questions can I ask, but what questions, should I be asking of this data as I look and navigate my BI? And that can sometimes be challenging. So by taking a metrics first approach, we can kind of lead the user to where they should be asking questions and what questions they should be looking at. And that's done through the concept of the idea of a metric or KPI within Metric Insights. So you'll see some of these tiles down here have a number on them, and it's where we've identified key metrics that we want to pull in and use as sort of leading indicators for our users. So what we've got here is an example metric. It's support ticket volume. It's monthly in this case, an aggregation of our daily data. Um, Typically, these metrics are sort of dimensionalized or filtered by different areas. So maybe it's ticket type, like I've got here. Maybe it's different countries or regions that we're doing customer support for. Whatever makes sense, we can pull that in and start to look at the time series of this particular metric, and that's what you're looking at in the chart there. When we initiate these metrics and start to track them, we also are tracking the sort of changes that we touched on before. So we're looking at the sort of volatility of these metrics and effectively, looking to generate alerts, for want of a better word, when we see unusual values in the data. And that can be everything from sort of tracking against targets or thresholds or metrics to what I'm doing here, where I'm looking for statistical deviations that are significant, that indicate something unusual is happening with this metric. So we're going to govern our content. We're going to identify key performance indicators and metrics that we want to track for our users. And what we can then start to do is create uh, user experiences, UIs on top of the catalog that help users then navigate through those metrics and that content, and as you'll see, using the AI components. So an example here is, let's say, so the data that we have in the demo here, we're a retail organization selling products both online and retail stores across the world. Maybe I'm an operations manager in that organization where I'm looking across different departments of metrics within my region, everything from sales to customer support, supply chain, inventory. And there's key metrics that we've identified that we want to track across those areas. And each of these metrics, as Marius touched on, could be coming from different reports or dashboards in different tools. So, sales might be coming from a Tableau dashboard, ticket volume might be coming from an underlying database or data store. But the key is that they're typically coming from different places and oftentimes different tools and technologies. But we want to summarize the metrics there on a single page for users. We're looking at the volatility, as we just said, of those metrics, so color coding them, as you could see, in this case, based on changes from previous period. And we're also um, looking at any obviously critical filter combinations that might be interesting. So if I'm responsible for a particular region, I'd obviously be looking at the filtered view of this content. Now we can pull concierge into this environment now, and what we can do is start to register agents, chatbots, if you like, that we've created in third-party tools and technologies into Concierge. So what I have behind the scenes here is I've got a number of Fabric data agents that have been set up on semantic models that we have created in Fabric. Um, so you'll see I've got sales, customer support, cost. I've got some agents that have been created in Databricks, our financial data here. The point being, as we touched on before, you're potentially creating these agents, in the underlying tools, in the underlying platforms that you have, potentially in multiple platforms. And for the ones that, again, you've tested and validated, we can register those, we can effectively certify them and attach them to Concierge as what we call domains in our environment. And you can see I've got domains in this case related to different departments and areas of the business. In doing that, what it allows us to do is then have a single place to ask questions of our data. So I can go in and ask a question like, what was our support ticket volume last month? And Concierge is going to take ownership of routing that question the correct domain and passing it off through an MCP server integration, an API-like integration into the underlying agent. In this case, a question like that would be passed off to our customer support agent, and I'll show you some of this in a minute. And the agent will answer the question, hopefully pass it back to Metric Insights, and we'll render it in one place. So users don't have to know which agent to go to necessarily, and again, they have one place to ask questions of that. But we can also tie that into our experience that we're looking at here, where, if I see something like satisfaction score is down, again, we can sort of automate the process of asking the questions. So you'll see when I hovered over this, there was a concierge icon. I clicked on that concierge icon and it basically, asks the question on my behalf. So we're context from the page into concierge, that context being, obviously the metric that I clicked on. So in this case, customer satisfaction score, the period that for the metric that is being rendered. So it knows I'm looking, this is data that's not updating. It knows it's, typically this would be last month or this month, right? Looking at the period. In our case, it's data from August. The change that's identified, and critically, any filter values as well. So, in this case, I'm looking at the high level across all countries, regions, and cities. It's basically taken that. It's recognized that it's a question around customer support. It's passed it off to the customer support agent through the MCP integration, and passed back an answer to that. So in this case, why was satisfaction score down? It seems to be related to in returns that we've had. We've had a lot of support tickets around returns, and it's done some analysis around that with some areas for, what I might drill into next. And obviously I could go in and continue the conversation and start to drill into this further. The other way of looking at this, so this is an example where I'm basically, using it as an analyst. If I picked up the phone to an analyst, I might be asking these sort of questions when I see the red on this sort of metric. As Marius said, though, the other use case is where we're sort of spotting really significant changes that we might want to pre-analyze on behalf of the user and let them know. So in this case, one of our metrics here has had a pretty significant jump in it. So ticket volume, 50% almost increase over the previous month. In this case, behind the scenes, we may want to alert the user to this particular issue. So you'll see that there's an alert icon on this particular number here. If I click on that, you'll see it passes it into concierge again, but I got an immediate answer here because this is something that we spotted already when the data updated. There's something significant has happened with this particular metric. It's gone and already done that sort of root cause analysis, that first level of root cause analysis around what potentially caused this spike, again, the returns related issue. And it's sort of immediately there for me to see and be alerted to in this case. So I don't have to again know to ask a question of that. It's kind of automatically spotted it. And I may go on and ask. Sorry, just come over here. I may go on and ask additional questions, so we don't have to wait here. I've got it preloaded, but I may go on and ask additional questions around. Did any suppliers see a big increase in returns in that same period? And in this case, again, concierge will recognize that even though this first alert was based around customer support, it's smart enough to know that now I'm asking about a supply chain issue here, and it's going to route the question to a new domain and come back with any additional context. So a combination of alerting and then asking questions around that, but really a very guided experience there. And so again, to sort of back up a little bit, so govern your BI content. make sure that's all certified and in a central location, bubble up metrics that are useful for different personas across the organization, present those in a very sort of easy to consume way, like we're looking at here, guide people to what questions they should ask, but alert them if there's critical things that, really require their attention. And so the final piece of this is again, the distribution aspect of that. Um, Not relying on people to, oh, actually, I'll just show you one more thing here. Let's go back to the launch pad before we look at that. Obviously, as well, tying it back to the BI reports and dashboards that we spoke about in the first place. So, I have an alert as I'm doing that root cause analysis. I might want to drill into that metric that has come from or associated with a particular, in this case, live Power BI dashboard here, having the context of going back to the dashboard and being able to do further analysis is also critical to sort of back up what again concierge is telling me, because again we know this is a certified piece of content that the numbers are accurate and I might want to look at in more detail. So again, to jump over to this again, pushing this information to people as well, whether it's via collaboration tools, Slack, Teams, or whether it's through email or the mobile device, you know, not relying on people to come in and look at the portal every day. I can receive emails like this, which is basically that alert that we were just looking at on the metric on the page where support ticket volume spiked, layering on the concept of user maps that Marius touched on, where if I'm responsible for just a region, in this case the US, I want to make sure that we're only alerting people within that region or who are interested in that region, and that it's showing the filtered information. And by that I mean the filtered metric value, if that's appropriate, but also the filtered associated report that might be interesting. So in this, pre-filtering the Power BI dashboard to that region, taking an image and providing a filtered link to get back into that. So pushing information to users, across all of the different things that they might be interested in, but in a way as well that isn't spamming them with every change that's happening. Right? Typically, every metric is changing, but only looking at the ones that are significant to users. So hopefully that has started to sort of pull together a practical example of what we've been talking about over the last few weeks. Yes, you can go and turn on um, these Ask Your Data solutions within these different tools and technologies, but doing it in a more sort of structured or governed way really gives your users a better experience, a more useful experience, a guided experience. Is going to give much more useful information at the end of the day. So thanks for those that have stuck with us throughout this series. Hopefully this has been interesting to you. Opening it up for questions at this point. A couple have come in, so we'll spend a few minutes going over there. But if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to enter them into the Q&A window. So Marius, are you back
I'm
there?
here. I'm back. Thanks for the demo.
Um, So question here, can you just expand on sort of what tools you integrate with? I'm suspecting that's probably specifically around the AI components, but I guess also the catalog stuff would be
Yeah, yeah.
interesting. Can you touch on that? Yeah.
So maybe let's start with the BI component. So because that's the foundation. So there you can connect to all the major BI tools, whether that's in Tableau, Power BI, Click, Sigma, MicroStrategy, you name it. We connect to pretty much everything across the enterprise. Um, and we have, custom plugins that work with their APIs to do that. And that's where we get the metadata, and that allows the whole experience to work. For AI, we connect to any agent that can be exposed via MCP, which is, those of you that are in the space, MCP is kind of the lingua franca, so to speak, of communication or the standard protocol between agents. And it is so that means Fabric. That means it has the MCP server for Fabric data agents. Excuse me. Um, Snowflake has it for Cortex, Databricks has it, and then you can also build your own data agents using various framework, whether it's Vertex framework or the Microsoft Azure framework, and those will work as well. And we do OAuth, so identity is preserved, and you know that row level security is maintained as the user kind of traverses and asks questions across these different agents.
Yeah, there was a question about that, so maybe drill into that a little bit more, Marius, in terms of the. So we do, yeah, the question was, do you enforce row level security?
Yeah, yeah. So the way that that works is that when you connect, there's a standard sort of OAuth 2 flow that is supported through MCP. And all of these vendors I just mentioned all support them, and generally it's supported universally. And how that works is that we will keep your very first time the user has to log in, authenticate to that particular source. So maybe, for example, authenticate to Snowflake. But after that's been done once, we keep a token that then we can use to refresh and regenerate a new session for them every time. And that allows us to basically have a single sign-on experience whereby they don't have to keep on logging onto different agents. And and then at the same time, because they're communicating with that agent as them, not as some kind of service account, you know that the row level security that's been enforced in the database or in the Fabric ecosystem or wherever that might be, is going to be preserved in the interaction. So it gives you transparency that way.
Okay, probably got time for one more question here. Last call. If there's any quick ones in the chat. Any best practices in terms of user experience if you don't have an agent for all your data, just
Yeah.
particular metrics?
So I mean, I think that is the reality that most people are under. You're building this out, and you have to start somewhere. You're not going to have. I mean, Mike showed all those KPIs, and they all have, could potentially have a way to be able to do why type questions behind them. But you might not be in that situation. You might be in a scenario where you just, you've spun out one or two agents and Databricks to analyze the particular areas, and the other KPIs don't have analysis. There are two things that we recommend for that. One is you can do some root cause analysis natively within Metric Insights. You can ingest sort of detailed data at a dimensional level, and then and then you just we have a facility where you point an LM to that, and then it will provide you kind of an analysis to tell you how is this trend being driven by the dimensionality underneath it, right? So you can say, oh, I've got a drop in gross margin. Well, that's because of it's happening across these particular product lines, these geographies, etc. So that you can do kind of out of the box directly with Metric Insights. And then outside of that, I think it's okay to have that KPI experience, and some metrics just don't have have that little concierge icons, and some don't. And you start off by deploying the root cause analysis for most important metrics, and as you add a root cause analysis for additional KPIs, you just turn that on, right? So there's no reason why you have to boil the ocean on this stuff. You can start with your most important, most critical KPIs for a particular audience, and then move on from there, and then gradually expand and add more value over time.
Well, we're close to 45 minutes here, so we're going to wrap up. If there's any additional questions, we'll answer those offline. As I said before, the whole series that we've been through and more is available on our YouTube channel. Look out for future invites if these sort of discussions are interesting to you. But thank you for everyone who joined us today and who joined us on previous sessions. Yeah, appreciate you taking the time, and thanks, Marius. And we hope
Thanks,
to
Mike.
chat with people soon.
Yeah, look forward to the next one. Thank you all. Talk to you soon.